attending. Thank you, Manny, for recording. Just want to give folks a heads up. We'll be recording, and then you'll probably see a little prompt in there. I'm going to make sure the folks are okay with that. Right? Seems like everybody's there. All right. Get started here. So today we'll do kind of like we're doing right now, kind of brief welcome. We'll go over a little bit about the participatory budgeting process and the project itself here in Marin County, as well as covering the purpose of the goals of the RFP and talked a little bit about the scope of work. And we'll get also into some logistics about how to actually submit the proposal and hold some time for questions and answers as well. And let's get going here. So we wanted to provide a quick overview about what is participatory budgeting. You might have or might not heard about this because this is we've seen this implemented across different jurisdictions here in Marin. We really leverage it in a way to actively engage folks in co-creating solutions to really improve their quality of life in their communities. Our board in this jurisdiction allocated $2.5 million to fund community initiated projects to advance equity here. The way that we also prioritize areas were with the use of the Healthy Places Index, really focused in areas in Marin City, the Canal, Novato, and West Marin. We led with different and kind of core values around how we went around PB here. And it really was about improving the county, but also expanding civic engagement in the way that folks engage with us as a county and really develop new leadership as they were going through the process of equitable public spending, right? And ultimately disrupting the ways in which our systems are created to disrupt injustice that exists in those communities. So this is our PB rulebook that you see on the right hand here. I want to invite everybody to also go on our website on PB. All of these materials and the full participatory budgeting rulebook is available online for folks. And I'll keep referencing that throughout the presentation today as well. We want to talk a little bit about the role of the PB committee, or sometimes referred as a PBC, which was a group composed of 15 individuals that really came across from different lived experiences and across different areas of Marin County to come together and really much more co-lead this process with us. They helped co-design outreach strategies, also provided advisory recommendations around the process, and really one of the biggest and most key important pieces that they really supported the evaluation process for the PB proposals that came eventually during that phase of the process. I'm going to walk over now the different phases of PB in shortly here, but really we'll talk through the brainstorming ideas phase, the develop and refine proposals phase, voting until funding, and then where we currently are now, which is our implementation phase. I think it's fair to say that we're still in the process of PB. We're very much in the purple over here, but I'll walk through all the different buckets here for us. I don't know why I did that. All right, so the brainstorming ideas phase really focused on engaging community to not only just introduce the idea of PB, but really focused on uplifting and having conversations around how is that they would like the 2.5 million invested in their own communities. We had an interactive tool that also is available on our PB website. We won't focus it here as well, but if you want to do more research, it is available to, you're able to see what proposals, basically how folks communicate with ideas and proposed ideas around those 5 priority communities that we talked about. Over 250 ideas were submitted by community members across the county, and it involved different levels of engagement to ask folks this question: how would you spend $2.5 million to improve your community? Next on the define and proposals phase, this phase really focused on the actual development of proposals, as well as some grant writing assistance to support folks who may need it or wanted support in creating their proposal. There was a little bit also of support in matchmaking a little bit and supporting big organizations and encourage them to partner with smaller community-based organizations so they would come together to eventually bring these ideas to life through a proposal. And this all kind of also covers the evaluation of the proposals themselves. So let's dive right in. For the proposals themselves, they range anywhere from $10,000 to $250,000 each, and they could either be 1-year projects or 2-year projects, right? So within that 2-year frame. As mentioned, we also had some free writing assistance for folks. And overall, at the very end of it all, we had a total of 104 applications submitted. Next on to our voting phase. This is the area where out of the proposals that were evaluated eventually made it to what we called the community voting ballot and allowed folks to vote on the proposals that were put together by folks and get an idea where community wanted this allocated. So a little bit about the voting process themselves. The community ballot itself composed of a total of 24 projects. I just want to clarify here that these were 24 projects that made it to the ballot, where as a result of the evaluation of the 104 applications that came through the proposal space, right? So out of the 104, 24 projects made it to the ballot itself. And voting was available online and in person. And we had different kinds of really thinking through the eligibility. Basically, any community member who was at least 14 years old, who lived, worked, owned a business, or could attend here in Marin County. Immigration status was not required or asked about in any way, shape, or form during the process. This is a little bit of what our ballot looked like, and a couple of photos in here. And a little bit of our engagement process. Our goal was really to be able to engage at different phases and making sure that we were uplifting the community in the same way that we had them engage in the ideas phase, so that they were really able to see the connection between development of ideas and then now voting in some of those proposals. So we held some events in person. Of course, voting was always available online, tabling at different spaces, all with the big focus and loving focus on the priority areas of the Marin City, the Canal, Novato, and West Marin. At the end of the voting phase, and a little bit about our strategy on how we allocated the funds, was to really fund as many projects as possible, right? So we went from 104 projects to the 24 that made it to the ballot. That essentially what ended up being decided, we ended up funding the top projects, a total of 16 projects with the most votes that community members voted on. And the rest of the projects received a total amount of $10,000. So just again, in general, the PB overview here, I'm going to pass it over to our director, Jamillah, as well.
Thanks so much, Denia. So again, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for making time to be with us today. We're excited to hear your questions and feedback after we wrap up this brief presentation. But we wanted to just pause for a moment and help make this real for you all and really show how some of our grantees have been using the PB dollars that they were allocated. And so I'm going to share just a couple of projects just to give you a flavor for what these organizations are doing. All right, so hopefully you can see that okay. I'm going to make my screen a touch bigger for everyone. So this is an example, as Denia described, we had 4 priority communities that we focused in on. One of them is Novato. And so this is an example of a project that was one of our runner-ups for the Novato community, and it's called Creciendo Juntos, or Growing Together. And it basically involved their promotoras going out and facilitating workshops with community members on topics like mental health, stigma, stress management, positive parenting, suicide prevention. They focused in on low-income communities of color for the folks who they reached out to. There was a really strong coordination with the Novato Schools Initiative as well. And one of the highlights from this project is that over 152 families has been served. And we know this information because we asked all of them to submit periodic reports to us. And so the winner of this process, or the consultant that we select rather, would have some work to do around evaluating some of those reports, really going through, synthesizing the highlights and seeing what came from the money that was allocated to them. The next one I want to showcase for you all is a project out in Marin City, which is historically an African American enclave, and we've seen some shifts in demographics over the last 20 some odd years. But there is a real desire to retain the sense of Black cultural identity in this community. And so one of the projects that received funds through PB was an organization called the MC Arts Gallery. And they were able to utilize the money to shift their gallery from a pop-up shop, a pop-up museum, if you will, to a brick and mortar location. So they were able to secure a long-term commercial lease through the money that they were allocated from PB. And this is just a beautiful space where artists and educators and entrepreneurs come together in celebration of the contributions of Black people to Marin City. The next one I want to highlight for you all is what's called the Park Project, and this is in the canal area of San Rafael. And this is traditionally a Latine community, and they wanted to really focus in on resiliency. For those who aren't familiar, Marin is grappling with a number of climate change issues, as many communities across the country are. And so this project was focused on expanding and strengthening the emergency preparedness skills of canal community members, of canal residents. And so there was a real neighbor helping neighbor model that they focused on for some of our lower income community members in the canal. And so they were able to utilize their funds to host a series of workshops, all with the goal of building people's resiliency when it comes to emergencies and disasters. The last one I want to highlight for you is a project out in West Marin, which is one of our more rural communities here in the county. And this project is called Growing Community Wellness. And they use their funds to create a Latina women retreat for healing, as well as a community garden party. So there was a real sense of belonging that they were hoping to cultivate through their project. And as you can see, some of the highlights here, they talk about the process of planning and implementing the retreat for Spanish-speaking women was a total joy. And the space was really focused on healing and nature, connection to food, to culture, as the real essential ingredients to building healthy and strong communities. So I wanted to showcase these for you just to give you a flavor for some of the projects that received funds, and to tell both the kind of quantitative story of how many people they reached, what was the impact from a number standpoint, but also qualitatively of what was the impact in terms of people's hearts and minds shifting as a result of the projects. So we're excited to work with the firm that's selected to really help tell the story of impact for participatory budgeting. I think Denia mentioned at the top that this is the first time we've ever done something like this here in Marin County. So we're a pilot program. So we had that $2.5 million to launch this pilot. And now we've really been able to demonstrate proof of concept. And we're excited to take our learnings and all that we glean from cycle 1 into cycle 2. And so the evaluation will be really, really helpful for us to refine our thinking and our approach for cycle 2. Where were areas where we could have gone a little bit deeper, we could have been more intentional, we could have been a touch more thoughtful. How could we engage even more people in the process? So these are types of things that we're hoping to work with the selected consultant on. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Denia.
Thank you, Jamillah. I think it brings things much more to life when we're able to share some of the work, the actual work of the projects. I'm going to share my screen here, folks. How many times have you heard that during virtual meetings? Oh, it's sending me all the way to the back. Don't get whiplash as I'm going really fast through the slides, okay? Really gonna dive into the RFP itself, but right before I do that, I wanted to just uplift this winners map that many for us put in the chat. It really illustrates some of the community projects funded at their full amount. I want to highlight that, and it allows for community members to really see project implementation and kind of where they're at, right? I think it's fair to say that we are in the project implementation phase right now. Folks have submitted one progress report, and there's another one coming up in April. So back to Jamilah's point about telling the story, right? We're trying to capture that through the reports, and we want to make sure that community also has an idea of what is going on. And our strategy for that has been through this map, of course, and again, pointing that in the map. So that's a little bit on the implementation side. Where we are right now is, as I mentioned, currently reporting. Folks are about to submit their first big summary report, and we are in the evaluation of the PB process, which is why you're here with us today. Currently, PB projects are reporting on year one. Some projects, as mentioned, are either 2 years or 1 year projects, right? We wanted to share a little bit about some of the reflections that we've had through the PB process thus far. And this definitely has evolved as we have been right in the thick of implementation and working with grantees. But really, we recognize the importance of resource community engagement to make sure the folks, we reach this to its full potential and really true to the values of PB. Recognition that we can always do more, right? That is a big piece, and recognizing that we're in a pilot phase. So really thinking around confirmation that communities are experts in their own needs and their own lived experience is something that really stands out as we see these projects come to life. Building systems and processes is the most effective way of addressing equity, right? This is why we are so eager to engage in evaluation process to make sure that we are really thinking through the way that process PB as a process and as a system is really connecting true to its values. Data collection is a continuous improvement practice. I think that speaks for itself, and it's also part of the pieces that we're seeing through reporting and conversations with grantees from the ideas phase all the way to the proposals. We see that through and through. All right, we're going to get to the actual evaluation and a couple of logistics and components that are kind of key and important here. So just some general information for this project, we're allocating a total of $75,000. The anticipated contract period for now, it's going to be a total for 7 months, and it's expected to get started in April and around October of this year. Questions from this webinar but also if they were to be emailed, can be directed to equity@marincounty.gov by tomorrow. So if you have any questions, please send them by tomorrow. And if we definitely prefer put in the subject line questions for PB evaluation. All responses to this webinar, the questions that are posted in this webinar, but also that we get through email, will be available on our website by February 5th. So we'll have an opportunity to have those captured for folks there. So I think Jamillah talked a little bit about it, and I've been kind of putting a little bit of seeds along the way, but really the purpose of this RFP is to have a holistic and comprehensive evaluation of the Marin County participatory budgeting process. The outcomes of this evaluation really are going to help us strengthen and refine the PB process in itself and ensure that it really remains true to its values of being transparent and responsive to community needs, aligned with the county's commitment to equitable participatory government and civic engagement. Kind of like our North Star. Let's talk a little bit about the scope, right? So there are a couple of things in the scope that we're hoping that would be covered as we begin to working with the vendor here. So the first one is to assess if the objectives that we mentioned in the PB rulebook, right? It's kind of like our guide that are actually met through each phase, through the ideas phase, the proposals, the voting, the funding, and the implementation, whether those values are being met through that process. Also, we want to make sure that through evaluation and assessment process, we get actionable recommendations for future versions of PB, right? To make sure that we're refining and enhancing and always being in continuous improvement. We also make sure, as Jamillah touched based on, to really highlight some of the pieces have been really awesome about PB, right? So like focusing on best practices, because this does inform the way in which we do equity work. So evaluate the effectiveness and inclusivity of those strategies is pretty key. And includes reviewing outreach methods, participation rates, the application of anti-racist principles, among other topics. And that goes hand in hand with the values of PB, right? It's meant to be a process where it's anti-racist, it's equity, and making sure that we're highlighting and uplifting those best practices that came across the way. The other piece is data analysis. So really analyze that the data collected during each phase of the PB process. This includes participation statistics, demographic information, really key, any feedback gathered throughout the outreach process, and analysis on how the process reached and engaged all of these diverse communities. It's key. So the actual format requirements in terms of the RFP itself, I'm going to walk through each one of them. The first is a cover letter. And really, the specifics of the RFP itself are on the RFP itself, but I'm just going to cover really briefly here. Also an organizational description in the project approach. Please let no be more than 3 pages. And proposed work plan in table format, and really clearly outlined what would be your proposal as outlined for the 7 months that the project's implemented, as well as a budget and budget narrative. That is really what we're trying to highlight here is making sure that it connects to the proposed work plan that you submitted with table format. References, please listing all references for the members that are going to be included in this project or that you intend to include in this project, as well as staff qualifications or resumes. We always love to see work samples, especially and prefer that we are seeing similar projects around evaluation that include community engagement through. A little bit about the evaluation criteria. We have a committee that will evaluate each submission, and this is the breakdown of kind of each piece of the criteria. Team qualifications, including really relevant professional lived experience, comparable to the work of the intended proposal that is being put forward. Clear and thoughtful description of the team's equity-centered project approach and how that actually is embedded into the scope that you're proposing. Experience in engaging historically underserved communities and equity-centered and culturally responsive way, so highlighting any practices on that. And then those are all 25%, 15% really making sure that we have a budget and fiscal narrative that has a really clear and transparent way that aligns with the scope that you're putting forward. And as well as knowledge and experience in engaging Marin County communities. Oops. A little bit about our important dates. I made a note here if you really want like a 1-pager that has all the dates, on page 14 on the RFP document will give you the same table. The RFP was released on January 17th, as many of you may know. Today we're in the informational session. Tomorrow is our deadline to submit any written questions via email. We have responses to that on February 5th. Your deadline to submit proposals, and we hope that you all do. By the way, we're hosting this webinar to making sure that we're answering questions and really want to see proposals be submitted by February 20th by 5 p.m. And please make sure that you put on the subject line PV evaluation proposal. We'll go over shortly into like how to submit your proposal and what format you should include them in. But I just want to highlight that day, February 20th. And you'll receive receipt confirmation by February 25th that your proposal has been received. We'll then move on into selecting and reviewing proposals with that committee over sometime in March, and you'll get notified of the recommendations that we'll put forward via email around March as well. And we'll kick off the project right in April and wrap around October. So just uplifting this timeline for you all. And again, that is available on page 14 in case you need reference. So how to actually submit your proposal. Proposals are only being received electronically. Just want to kind of highlight that and uplift that. And they should be emailed at this address, equity@marincounty.gov. The format should be all compiled into one document. If you run into issues, please let us know. But we're hoping that any supporting materials, such as Word documents, additional files, should be incorporated within that PDF. If you have any clickable links or links to Google folders or whatever it may be, please make sure that they're active and they're actually clickable and they direct to the appropriate sources. And when you emailed your proposal in, please title PB RFP proposal dash, and then whatever the company name or the vendor name or whatever it is. This allows us, it's an inbox, so it really streamlines the process for us. For any questions and clarifications, I think I already mentioned this many times, questions at our inbox and email the subject line questions for PB evaluation RFP, and please submit by tomorrow. So now we're gotten to the fun part here for questions. So I just want to kind of open up. We do have one more piece here. Actually, no, that's it. So wanted to make sure we leave some space for questions for folks. We, as mentioned, have the opportunity to submit questions via email too. So I just want to bring my slide here down and allow for folks to do that. If you're able to write them on the chat, oh, go ahead, Jamillah.
No, sorry, Denia. So one question we've already received is on whether or not this PowerPoint that we just went through will be shared. And so we will make this available on our website. So yes, this is the short answer.
Correct. Thank you for that. Can't see all the questions coming up in the chat when you're sharing screen. I appreciate that. Any questions that are coming up for folks? And if you put it on the chat, also it's okay. We'll actually, you're able to capture it better too. Oh, I see Gary's hand.
Thank you, and I really apologize. I did come in early, or came in early. I came in really late, so I apologize for that. And you may have already said this, but could you please drop in the chat your address, the website address? I'm sorry.
For
So
the
thanks for
Office of
making this
Equity
available.
website? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That
In particular, why don't we drop in the funding opportunities page? I think that's what would be most helpful. So we'll pop that in there.
Oh,
Agreed.
perfect. I appreciate it.
Hello, I had a quick question. I understand that there is a 7-month timeline for this work, and I was wondering if you all are able to highlight any additional context around that window, if there's a particular event happening at that period. Yeah, if there's any additional context that you all would highlight related to the timeline, I'd appreciate hearing.
Sure, I can take that one first and invite the team to chime in. Thank you for the question. You know, we are about to enter year 2 of the PB cycle 1, right? So our first cycle. As Denia mentioned, it's a 2-year process. And so now feels like a really right time for us to take in all of the learnings that we gleaned from cycle 1 as we develop and design cycle 2. So we plan to launch cycle 2 in the fall of 2026. And there's a lot of lead up that happens before we launch. And so we wanted to give ourselves plenty of time to really see where were there opportunities for improvement? What did we do really well? What feedback are we hearing from community around maybe shifts or things that they would want to see differently in cycle 2? So all of that would really help us really put our best foot forward as we launch cycle 2 in the fall of 2026. So that's the primary driver, Dominique, is wanting to give ourselves time to take in all of this good information and learning and really feed that forward into cycle 2. Great question.
Got it. Thank you.
I see Rachel's hand.
Yeah, I have a few questions. But I was wondering if you have a preference between a local group versus a group that has sort of the national perspective. So that was one question. And then I'm interested in sort of the languages you would see needed for translation and interpretation. I saw that in the RFP. And then I'm just interested. So those are my two main questions around the RFP. I'm also interested in um, where does the 2.5 million come from? Is that city? Is that state? Or county, city, federal, state? And then I'm really interested, just for my own learning, what was the application process for the organizations that applied, and seeing how some of them are more grassroots. Was there assistance given? Sort of how were people able to put together the proposals that ended up getting funded? So I guess the main questions for the proposal are interest level in local group versus national group, and then languages needed for translation and interpretation.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And I'll pass it to the team in a minute. But I think those are great questions. You were rattling them off there very quickly. We love it. I think that in terms of local versus national, I wonder, Denia, if you can put back up the evaluation criteria slide. And so about 10% or so of the final score is devoted to really having these individuals who apply, that they have knowledge of and experience engaging in our communities, in Marin County communities. And so to the question of local versus national, we have many consultants we work with at a national level, but they have experience working in Marin County, specifically perhaps within those target priority communities that we mentioned to you of West Marin, Novato, Marin City, and the Canal area. And so it's not so much a preference between local and national if you feel that you come equipped with knowledge of our local communities. So I hope that addresses that question. And then in terms of languages, we have primarily translated our materials for this process into Spanish as well as Vietnamese and English. And so those are the most spoken languages in our community and across the county. So that would be what we would expect of our selected vendor. Denia, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think to the question about national, local, and languages, I think altogether is there, Jamillah already mentioned there's definitely no preference on local to national. I think it's more about having an evaluator that understands how to be culturally responsive and really bring those strategies and those practices of understanding how to work in community, especially our priority communities through PB, and adopting those practices at a local level. Right. So that is really key. And that goes hand in hand with the translation piece. So really having somebody who understands how to make decisions about how they adopt those strategies around language, right? Language interpretation, is it needed? What does it mean? What is the difference between that and cultural responsiveness, and being able to apply those principles and being able to see really shine through in that proposal clearly.
Those responses are extremely helpful. Thank you both.
I think you had a few other questions too. One was regarding what type of assistance was provided to the applicants, and how did we go about making those decisions on which applications would eventually move to the voting phase.
Yeah.
And I think there was another one that I didn't quite catch. I'm looking at our chat here to see.
I was interested in you said the 2.5 million, which was with the money. Where does that funding come from? Kind of what's that funding stream?
Sure. So great question. So the $2.5 million is from the American Rescue Plan Act funds, part of the funds that the county received. So the ARPA dollars that the county received, we received several $1,000,000, and we chose to allocate 2.5 of those to the first ever PB cycle here in Marin County. So that's the source of the money. Moving forward for cycle 2, we've allocated funds from the general fund. So we already have $2.5 million earmarked for cycle 2, and that's coming directly from the general fund budget. In terms of how we supported our applicants, this was a really intentional and important piece of our process. We really wanted to encourage first-time applicants to county grant-making processes to apply. We wanted to encourage voices and perspectives from those who may not traditionally participate in civic government for a variety of reasons. And so as we thought about who we wanted to attract to the process, we also had to think really specifically about how we would support them in their journey. And so part of what we did is we had a team of grant writers who provided no cost assistance to applicants to help develop their proposals, to help think through how to really tell the story of what they want to accomplish, to help them do things like develop their budget, to get letters of reference, for example, to work with a fiscal sponsor. So we did a lot of supporting our applicants to present really compelling applications. And I think the other thing to mention is we also really encouraged them to work together. We wanted to move away from the spirit of competition into more of a spirit of collaboration. And so for projects that we found that were very similar, we thought, why don't you consider hooking up with or teaming up with another organization to make your application even more compelling. Another thing that we did was matchmaking. So we had some organizations that are really kind of sole proprietors, just individuals, right? Just maybe a local parent, a local community member who said, I have this great idea, I want to make it happen. I need a fiscal sponsor. And so we teamed them up with a fiscal sponsor, for example. So there was a variety of ways that we were supporting applicants along the journey. And those are a handful of them.
That is so wonderful. It's just such a great model. So thank you for sharing all those details. I really appreciate it. And I think you got all my questions.
I see a hand there.
Hi, I can go next. There's time. Hi, my name is Maitwan Win Akbar. Thanks so much for these thoughtful materials and your overview of the process and the RFP materials. I just had in mind a question about in building out the fiscal narrative and the budget, whether we should take into consideration stipends for doing any sort of retrospective interviews with community groups. Obviously, we don't want to burden them with evaluation if they're not compensated, or might need incentives to be able to offer some of their personal experiences. Do you foresee the chosen evaluation team having direct contact with the grantees?
I can tee this one up. So great question. And we definitely anticipate there being connection to and involvement with the grantees. They are a really key audience, as you might imagine, and us understanding how effective and equity-centered and anti-racist our process was and the outcomes of our process were. And so communicating, involving, hearing from them, I think will be really central to the work. The same is true for our participatory budgeting committee that Denia touched on at the top of the call. So they were our partners in really co-designing this. And so we'd want you to hear from them as well. And so, in light of that, I think stipends are definitely something that is valuable and that we would anticipate a consultant proposing. Great question.
And sorry, just to follow up, what's a standard sliding scale rate? 50 to 100, 30 to 60 minutes? Do you have a best practice for that in your county?
We do. So we recently developed a stipend policy countywide, and it basically asserts that for a meeting, we would provide a $50 stipend, a meeting of say 1 to 2 hours, a $50 stipend for the participant, right? And so you're welcome to go above and beyond that. You're welcome to think creatively about how else to do that. That's just what we do here as a matter of course, but we do We do oftentimes go above that. We get a little more creative as need be. Visa gift cards is certainly, you know, a way to go. We've used that in the past, Target gift cards, for example. So we really look to participants to share, you know, what's your preferred way of receiving compensation, and try to meet those where they're at. Thank you for the questions.
I'm reading a little bit of a follow-up question. Is there a separate budget for data collection incentives, or is that included within the $75,000 if incentives are part of the evaluation design?
Yes, thank you for the question. So, you know, there is, and I don't know if you all had a chance to really dig into the RFP just yet, but we are proposing this 75K budget, and you know, that could be inclusive of incentives. At the same time, we also have language in the RFP that says if you have additional tasks that you think are important to make this work, to really help this be a more effective process, a more kind of learning centered process, then you can propose that, right? And so we will consider that. 75K is our baseline of what is available, and we do hope that most people can fit their task into that. But if you have some other things that you might recommend that we consider, then you can use that additional opportunity to share how you would augment the budget with these other tasks.
Yeah, and I'll just add there, because Jamillah opened up that language that's on the RFP as well, that we just have to make sure that that's clearly outlined in terms of what you're proposing. So just kind of wanted to uplift that too, right? If there was to be something proposed as different, then I think we just want to make sure that that really comes through that proposal as is written too. So then we're able to, and our committee is able to read that through. All right. I want to open up for my team members to bring in and see if there are any other comments or insights that might come up for folks before we close this space. Jamillah, Manny, anything you want to add?
Just please take a look at the references that were linked in chat. I did include the RFP rulebook, a link to our webpage, which is divided into every phase of the PB cycle. So there was the voting process, the submission of proposals, the ideas gathering, and now the implementation of the projects. So it's pretty comprehensive, but if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out.
Thanks for that, Manny. So again, just want to thank everyone for carving out time. I know the new year is off and running and quite busy for all of us. And so much is going on across the country. And so we appreciate you all carving out some time to be with us today. I would also just add that we have a number of other grant making processes in the county, and we really are leveraging PB and using our lessons learned here to think about how we can export some of those findings to those other processes. So this has impact beyond just participatory budgeting, right? We also have a number of other grant making processes in the county, and we're looking to kind of holistically evaluate those as well, not through this contract, but definitely applying our lessons learned to these other processes. So just wanted to share kind of the ripple effect of this for Marin County. And with that, I'll pass it back to Denia.
Thank you, Jamillah. That's a great way of ending it on the ways that our work impacts bigger initiatives. So thank you all for making time. Please don't forget to submit any other written questions if they come up for folks, and we'll have them available posted on the link that was included in the chat. So again, thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see some proposals soon from you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.